Welcome to Waves, West Alabama, Voices Echoing Success, the podcast where local voices inspire big impact. Brought to you monthly by the Chamber of Commerce of West Alabama, this is your source for stories of leadership, innovation, and success.
And welcome into another episode of Waves, West Alabama Voices Echoing Success. And today, I am joined by a former colleague, a good friend, but the Director of Pardons and Paroles for Alabama, Cam Ward. Cam, thank you for being with us.
Kyle, thanks for having me on today. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of great and wonderful times that we had shared together in the legislature. You went on to do bigger and better things. And now we're getting kind of full circle, allowed to partner on some initiatives that hopefully are having a positive impact throughout West Alabama.
Yeah, and I like to tell everybody I got paroled from politics is what happened to me. Is 20 years in the legislature was enough, so this job has been great. Governor Ivey appointed me to her cabinet in 2020, and it's been a great run. I oversee what's called the Alabama Bureau of Pardons and Parole, which is separate from what's called the Board of Pardon and Parole. It's kind of a confusing issue, but the board grants or denies paroles and pardons, and then I oversee people who are on probation and parole in Alabama. Currently in Alabama, there's about 45,000 people on probation and parole. Believe it or not, 81% of the people I supervise are probationers, and only 9% are parolees. So it's just an interesting dynamic people don't realize. One of the things we've tried to do really hard is, and something I focused on a lot and put a lot of resources into, is what do we do to make sure someone who's been in prison or been in trouble with the law doesn't do a crime again or doesn't go back to prison again? What do we do? And one of the things I've really focused on, in addition to drug treatment, mental health treatment, is making sure with our labor market being the way it is, why aren't we focusing more on putting people back to work? Yep. Pay taxes. Don't be in jail living off the state dime. Pay taxes, be successful. And 9 times out of 10, that means they don't commit crime.
Well, and, so much of the recidivism is, hey, can I get back on my feet? Can I earn a living wage and be a productive citizen? Because I would say that the majority want to be in that category. They just often don't have the tools in order to get there.
Yeah, the prison system, we know this for a fact. There's some people who just need to be in prison for a long time. They just do. They're bad people. But there's a lot of people that usually get caught up with some sort of addiction. They get caught up with, they have a mental illness. Usually they both go together. And then the education level suffered, usually a lot of times third grade reading level. So what we try to do is provide that GED program. And we also partner with we're up to 17 private sector partners and organizations that say, Cam, we want to hire people. We want to do that. And I tell you right now, our recidivism rate is 29% in Alabama, actually making us one of the best in the Southeast. We're 22nd in the country in recidivism. My goal is by the end of the decade is to reduce that below 15%, which would put us in the top 5 in the country. But the way you get there is you've got to partner with the private sector, and how do you fill these jobs that they're needing? Good skilled jobs.
Well, and you're very familiar with our Second Chance programs here locally, but also Building Hope, which is an initiative that was kind of started out of the chamber. And that's the whole idea, right, is to have business and industry connected with those folks that have been justice impacted at some point in their life and open the door. We can't do it for you, but open that door and kind of create that what has been a filter where they don't feel like their access to those jobs is there and present, getting that part out of the way so that a job seeker goes into an interview or an application process knowing that employer has already accepted their faults of the past.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it is, and I've always said this, first and foremost, it should be the decision of the employer.
Yep.
The private sector employer should say, do I want to hire this person
and
or not?
Those guardrails could look different from employer to employer,
but
right?
That's why we have a free market.
Yep.
Let the employer decide. But what I have found is we've had a lot of employers call me and say, this is the job set I need. Now, we have a great partnership with Ingram State Technical College, great community college. They do a lot of our job training. Alabama Power has started doing job training on tree line trimming for us. Mm-hmm. And one of my favorite stories was we had a guy, we put him through a welding program. He was a drug addict. We got him his degree. We got him everything he needed to succeed. And what happens? He gets his welding certificate. He starts off, he'd been in prison for 15 years. He now makes $85,000 a year plus full benefits working down at the Bay. And so that's the story, because that guy's never coming back. And one number that goes along with that, and why I'm selfish about this, is if you get those skills, you conquer those demons, you get that job and that job placement, the recidivism rates for those who we've put through the programming cuts by half. They're less than 15%. Yep. So that's the magic sauce that gets me to that recidivism number I mentioned.
When you take that desperation factor out of the equation, right? And a lot of times we get repeat offenders because of that feeling of desperation. And so appreciate all the work that is going into that. You know, from a budgeting standpoint at the state level, which we've got to deal with kind of on the other end of the spectrum, you know, it affects so many things, like you said, mental health, but a ton of investment going into the state's prison system because of some overcrowding issues, but also just being totally dilapidated and not being able to function in a manner that can serve both the needs inside and the needs outside.
And I view us as kind of we're the third branch of law enforcement in the state. You have the front side, which is ALEA, your county sheriffs, municipal police, DAs. In the middle, you have DOC. Then on the back end, you have us. And I view this as a carrot and stick approach. We have 830 employees. Most are law enforcement. They supervise, they watch, and they keep up with people on parole, probation. But then also the carrot approach for us is we really do offer these services that say, if you want to go to work, if you're serious about getting a job, getting back on your feet, we're going to do this for you. And budgeting wise, it is literally 20% the cost to do that than it is to incarcerate them. And I'm not saying, some people, you break the law, you should pay for your crime. I totally agree. But when you come out, what I tell everybody is 95% of everyone in prison eventually gets out. What do you want that person to look like? I know what I want. If it's my neighbor, I want them to be safe, and I don't want them hurting somebody. And I want to be on the taxpayer dole. So the way to do that is good, meaningful employment.
Well, and kind of to that point, I think where a lot of the public kind of gets it skewed a little bit. We talk about parolees and pardons and those kinds of things. I think more on the parole side. Tell us about what that looks like if a inmate gets all the way to EOS, and then the state, then a lot of those tools in your toolbox are taken away, right?
Yeah, if they get to EOS, which is end of sentence, that means if I'm serving 5 years or 10 years, I get all the way to the last day. And when that happens, the state has no jurisdiction. You walk out the door, no one can say a thing to you. You go do whatever you want to do. You have no resources, nothing. You're going to commit a crime. You're coming back. I mean, it's just the way it is. But a lot of people say that's the best method. Well, I can tell you our counterparts in Arkansas, Mississippi, and Tennessee, and North Carolina now have told me, Cam, our recidivism rates have passed yours because we're into sentencing too many people. We need a little bit of a buffer in there where there's a transition to supervision.
A monitoring period, right?
A monitoring period, and also a time to get these people the mental health, drug abuse problems worked out, and a job. I mean, I hear that from other states are coming in and actually trying to copy our model, which I think is good for Alabama.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And, part of that, too, that plays in significantly in our community here in West Alabama is the mental health portion of that.
Yes.
We've been traditionally the mental health capital of the state because of the institutional beds that were located here in our community over the years. And all of that facilitates kind of this, what oftentimes seems like an endless cycle of, in, out in the community. And it has its way of kind of holding us back in some factors.
It does. And the mental health issue, you want to talk about the criminal justice system as a whole, the front part, the middle part, or back end like me. And I can tell you right now, the mental health issue drives it big time. And you can look at almost every high-risk person, every person who has a high risk of recidivism, 9 times out of 10, there's a mental illness involved.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And like I said, we see that here probably more acutely than other communities around the state. But the state has taken some big steps into addressing some of those things with the investment in crisis centers and other things, but still got a ways to go. I think we're trying to put out a fire that was lit a long time ago, and we're hearing those stories from around the country, like you were saying a minute ago. we've got to come up with an Alabama solution.
There was an issue way back, and it was the right decision. Poor planning was, let's get away from institutionalizing everybody. That was the old days. Remember, you put them in a home.
Yeah.
You didn't know what was wrong with you. You just put them in a home somewhere. They said, we got to get away from that, go to the community-based modeling. Well, when the United States did that, that was great. They just never took the resources away from the homes and put it into community-based treatment. And then one day we woke up and said, we have no beds anywhere now.
Right.
It's because we didn't invest. And that was just political decisions for many years. But I think Alabama is actually on the right path. Speaker of the House, Ledbetter, has been great about it. Commissioner Boswell, the mental health department, has been great. They really are focusing heavily on community investment in mental health treatment.
Well, and getting those provider rates to a point where there is a sustainable business model within serving for a very vulnerable population, I think is a key first step.
For the longest time, I think you were a Medicaid type rate, and you just can't. A business can't function on the Medicaid rate. You just can't. It's just not made for that. So having a better provider rate also ensures more community centers will keep coming. So that's good.
Yeah. Well, one other question that I've got going kind of back to the collaborative efforts that your office has taken on kind of around the state. We have quarterly meetings here that kind of identify resources and try to connect those businesses and industry with justice impacted individuals and understanding the needs of business and industry and where those lines are crossed and where they're not, what is a good situation, what's not. We always want to put the justice impact populations in a place where they can be successful.
Yeah.
And so what does that look like around the state?
So and I've been working on this for 5 years since I took office. And one of the things that I do is I look to the business community to tell me what their needs are. For a long time in Alabama, when they did people who were just coming out of being incarcerated, they basically put a cookie cutter, we're going to train you in these 5 things. Then they get out and go, well, but the market doesn't need these 5 things. So what I try to do is regularly poll business leaders, business organizations such as the chambers, and say, where are your needs? And then let's tailor our job training program to fit the needs of where the demand is. We have I think we have a 57% labor participation rate.
That's right.
As Secretary of Workforce Reed and I talked about this, and one of the things I said was, y'all tell me where the shortage is, and that's what we'll train to fit the shortage. And it's just smart. It's being smart about it. That's all.
Well, and then I think one of those kind of barriers to entry in a lot of those cases have been some bureaucratic barriers that I think we're trying to address during this legislative session. And if I'm not mistaken, Senator Elliott has put forth a bill to kind of break down some of those barriers.
We have 3 bills. Senator Elliott has one, Senator Smitherman has one, Representative Parker Moore has one, and Moore's in particular is one we have 1 vote away for final passage. It just basically says this: just because I've been in prison for some reason, you can't automatically, the government can't deny me a certificate to get my license.
Yep.
It doesn't require the business to hire you. The business knows fully what your record is, all that, but we've had government agencies that arbitrarily deny people license because they just don't like you. You committed a crime, you can't ever get a certificate. True story. We had in Tutwiler Prison, we had cosmetology being taught to female inmates. And when they got out, they said, well, you've been to prison, so guess what? You cannot get a license to practice cosmetology. That's just the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. So we have a bill, I feel very strongly that it's going to pass, that says you can't do that. If they're not qualified, fine, but you can't do it because they went to prison. And
arbitrarily just
but
let
the company decide if they want to hire you or not some government bureaucrats behind some desk.
Well, and there's certain agencies and boards that have to have those restrictions.
Well, DHR,
right?
You're not going to allow a child molester to work at a child care facility. You don't want someone who committed financial fraud to work for a bank. That kind of stuff will still be covered. But at the end of the day, just because I had a drug problem, all of a sudden that shouldn't bar me from getting a license to do any skilled profession in this state. That's just a dumb policy.
Right.
Let the business community do that.
The cosmetology piece is one example I continue to use. And then on the other end of that spectrum, maybe for home security purposes and installers, you probably don't want somebody that's been convicted of theft to going in and putting somebody's alarm system.
No, yeah, and it's just common sense stuff. But again, at the end of the day, I strongly believe if you've met all the educational requirements and training requirements, the company should decide that, not state government. And I think if the company has that freedom, then they can say, you know what? No, I don't want to hire anybody who's ever been to prison. That's their choice.
Yeah.
But a lot of them are saying, I really do want to hire them if I feel like they're going to be competent and do a good job. So let the business community drive it and not some government commission.
Yeah. Well, and then kind of piggybacking off of some of that, obviously the focus seems to be, and I think it's a positive focus on workforce participation rather than an unemployment rate. I continue to tell everybody, and I think is true. We can put all the tax incentives, the recruiting incentives that we want to out there, and if we can't supply a quality workforce, that is our incentive of the future, right? We need to be able to compete on a global stage, but for sure on a regional stage as far as workforce goes. And this is a huge facet into getting people reactivated back into that workforce participation number. And it is a huge barrier among others. We talk about childcare, housing, those kinds of things, transportation, but getting justice impact people back into the workforce is a big piece of that.
We've had back when I was finished at my time in the legislature, went to South Korea, and the South Korean officials, that's the first thing they told me. They said, we like Alabama, but we can't find enough skilled labor we just want skilled labor. I don't need another PhD. I don't need another degree. I need someone who can fix the machine when it breaks, because when it breaks, every second that goes by with it broken is money we're losing. So that's foreign governments even talk about the need for us having a more robust skilled labor market.
Yeah, no doubt. And the efforts that are going into that to be trained, get them ready, I think that's a win for everybody.
Yeah, it is. It's a win-win.
The cost associated that we have as taxpayers have to think about every day factors into the success that they have coming out the other side.
It's a win-win for me, because my number one job is public safety. And I know that if you have a good, stable job, and we've monitored and taken care of your underlying issues of mental health and substance abuse, if you've done that, I know for a fact public safety improves. All the data shows it. So that's what my goal is. And getting them a good job accomplishes the labor shortage, but it also accomplishes my job of public safety.
Well, that's awesome. Is there anything else that you would like to touch on today?
No, I would say 5 years in on the job, we were the second state in the country that started Reentry 2030, which is a national initiative. Missouri was first. We were second, of basically cutting recidivism in half by the end of the decade. And now 9 other states have actually followed our exact platform. We have Arkansas and Mississippi actually sending delegations over here to meet with us to talk about how we're doing it. So other states are mimicking what we're doing on the job training side and the collaborative partnerships with the private sector. And I think that's just good for Alabama.
Well, and I think it would be remiss if I didn't say thank you for including business and industry in those conversations, getting the feedback and input, because the last thing we want to do is put people through training programs where they're not the availability.
There's
of
no
jobs.
job for it. No need doing
it. No doubt about it. I want to call you Senator every time. Sorry. We both kind of
We've had enough
transitioned away from that.
We don't need any more titles or plaques. We're good to go on that front.
But Director, we appreciate you taking some time for us today. We appreciate the partnership we have with Pardons and Paroles, and it is our goal to make West Alabama a better place for everybody, and that's including those justice impacted individuals.
Well, thanks for having me on, Kyle.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us on Waves, West Alabama Voices Echoing Success, the official podcast of the Chamber of Commerce of West Alabama. Don't forget to subscribe and tune in next month as we continue to amplify the voices shaping the future of West Alabama. For more stories and updates, visit us online at westalabamachamber.com or follow us on social media. Until next time, keep making waves.
Alabama One, a partner of West Alabama Chamber, offers a full suite of financial products, including checking and savings accounts, personal loans for home, auto, and recreational vehicles, as well as land and equipment financing. Go to alabama1.org/what's your one to learn more. Equal housing opportunity.